right. Well, I was asked to share some things with you today. And imagine that from the time that you were little, you've heard about Italy. And what a fantastic place Italy is. And you worked, growing up, you learned some Italian, and you learned about their food and their culture, and what Italy was going to be like, and you just knew someday you were going to Italy. And you worked hard, you grew up, and you worked hard, and maybe you found a spouse, and you both wanted to go to Italy more than anything. And you saved your money, and you finally had enough, and you got your passport, and the day finally came, and you got on the plane, and you're so excited. Everything has always been Italy. You know people who have gone to Italy, and you've heard how wonderful it is, and you just can't wait to be there. And then the plane lands. And the stewardess says, "Welcome to Holland." I'm going to Italy. No, you're going to Holland, and you're staying here. And you still hear about friends that have gone to Italy and come back or lived there. But you're in Holland, and you're in Holland to stay. Now, you can either be bitter and angry that you're in Holland, or you can learn that, yeah, those Dutch people are pretty nice. There's windmills in Holland, and tulips. And there's some good things. There's some things that are a little hard, especially when you were expecting Italy. That's often what it feels like to learn that your child has a challenge. That's a lot of times what it feels like to know. You're always going to miss Italy. And there'll be times that you'll be sad about not getting to go to Italy. And there will be times that you're really thrilled to hear about these other people who have gone to Italy and the paintings they've seen and the music they've heard and the places they've been. And there'll be some times that you are so thrilled for them when you hear about their trip to Italy. And there are times that if somebody says spaghetti to you, you're going to burst into tears because you're always going to miss Italy. In a lot of ways, having a child with a challenge, whether it's a behavior challenge, a medical challenge, or a learning challenge, is like going to Italy. There are joys, there are good things, and there are things you will always miss. So, what I want to do today is to help you in your trip to Holland. Some of you don't know if you're in Holland or Italy yet. Plane's still in the air. When I was talking with a friend of mine back in Iowa who has a special needs child, one of the things we talked about is one that we have run into over the last 20 years is the biggest hindrance to a child being able to get help and a child being able to use their strengths to overcome their weaknesses is parental fear and denial. I don't want to go to Holland. You can sit in the plane and say, "I'm not in Holland, I'm not in Holland, I'm not in Holland." You're in Holland, honey. Sometimes we don't know. There is a range of development. We already talked about that. There's a bunch of papers and stuff out there. My copy machine got a good workout. There's things like this and books and all kinds of stuff you can look up on the internet about developmental milestones. That might be really helpful. There is a range, yes. And there is the child who, you know, you'll say, "Oh, gee, I'm kind of worried about so-and-so, he's not speaking yet." "Oh, don't worry about it. My second cousin didn't speak till he was 14, and he's the, head of this medical school now." Well, that's nice, but maybe that guy would have benefited and his family would have benefited if he'd had a little speech therapy when he was 3. Okay? So, one of the things that, for us, in my journey with my daughter, she was our 3rd child, and I knew the day she was born something wasn't right. There were 2 babies in the nursery. I was across the hall and I couldn't hear her cry, but I could hear the other baby cry. And when I went to nurse her, she chewed more than she sucked, and I told the nurse, and they said, oh, don't worry about it, all babies nurse different. I had this baby whose cry was weak, who wasn't gaining weight, and whose toes and a couple of fingers stayed curled. What are you going to do with that? So I kept getting patted on the head. And it got to the point for me, that twice I nearly loaded up my kids and I almost went to the hospital and said, evaluate me. I have to be losing my mind. There's either something wrong with this baby or something wrong with me, and nobody's doing anything, so it must be me. I really considered that I might be crazy. Then I landed in the office of a pediatrician who looked at me and said, 99.8% of the time, if a parent comes into my office and says, I feel like something's not right, I can't give you any clues. I have no idea why I feel like this. She said 99.8% of the time, that parent is right. And so she was great. She was very instrumental. She dug, that first appointment, she had us in there for 3 hours. She'd run a test, go see other patients, come back, and at the end it was, okay, I'm out of options for today. Go home, we'll make another appointment. If you think of anything else, call me. And that was that led to all kinds of good things. But what I'm trying to say is, if you think you might be in Holland, it's okay to check. Think of it this way. If you go take a child and you take him to speech therapy, and after 6 appointments they release him, does it mean he didn't need speech therapy? Maybe. Or maybe means he needed 6 appointments. If he didn't need it, did it hurt him? Probably not. He went to go play cool games with another adult. It probably didn't hurt him. The fear is real, and a lot of times we have to face our fear and ask ourselves, why do we fear? We are believers, and along with that generally comes that we're pro-life. We believe God made life and that it's valuable. When you have a child with a challenge, sometimes that belief gets pushed. We don't like to say it out loud, but it does. When my youngest, his first Mother's Day, I had to come to peace with God. My little guy was born in January, and Mother's Day was not tracking. He wasn't responding to the light. He wasn't responding to me or the bottle I held in front of him. I had to come to peace with God that if this child simply existed, and I never got to have a relationship with him, and I never got to see him play, that I could be thankful for the life that God gave him. And that was enough. He was alive, and life is a gift. We need to look at what our views of success and importance are. God has equipped all of us for good works which he has prepared for us to do. And the mentally retarded guy that cleans the bathroom at this church is just as important as the guy who's standing at the pulpit.
Amen.
But when it comes to our kids, it's hard to believe that. It's hard. Sometimes we have to say to God, you said it, and I want to believe it. Change my heart. Because life is important, and those gifts and abilities that each and every one of those kids, even if Zach stayed in a wheelchair and didn't interact with anybody and didn't even play, his life is still a testimony to God's majesty in creating life. Now, God didn't leave us there, and most of you who know him, unless you've known the story already, wouldn't probably think, unless you knew something about genetics, wouldn't even think there was anything different about him than the average 9-year-old. So he didn't leave us there, but I didn't know at that time. And so we have to, in order to really help our kids, be what He has intended for them to be, and to use their strengths to fill up for their weaknesses and overcome their weaknesses. We have to truly believe they're valuable in the way that God made them, and we have to truly believe that, shift our view of success. What does God call success? That you understand and know me, and that you fear me, and that you love me. You don't need a PhD for that. And sometimes that PhD is a hindrance to those things. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of friends who have kids. Warren is severely disabled. His obstetrician was drunk at his birth, and he went without oxygen. He is mentally retarded and has schizophrenia. Warren is in his 20s now, late 20s. No, he's 30. But Warren will sit in church, sing totally off key, but he loves Jesus. And when you start to talk about Jesus, he says, when I get to heaven, he'll tell his mom, I'm going to hold Jesus' hand, but I have to be careful because of where the nails were. Heaven is real to him, and Jesus is real to him, and he loves Jesus. I have another friend whose daughter is my Amy's age, and Christina has an undiagnosed syndrome, and she had CP, so she walked on her toes a lot. And I have a couple of great Christina stories. One is her mother had bought her a necklace for her birthday, and so now Christina, she went to school, Christian school, and she says, Christina, do not take off that necklace. That's your Christmas present. Don't take off your necklace. She goes to school, she comes back, her mom looks at her, Christina, where's your necklace? Well, Mom, it's in my pocket. Christina, I told you not to take off your necklace. Why did you take it off and put it in your pocket? Well, because I was walking down the hall and I saw my friend Susie coming, and I knew she would really like it. And I was afraid she might covet it, and it's a sin to covet, so I didn't want her to sin, so I took it. She was aware of being a stumbling block to others. Oh my goodness, how much I need that to be aware of something I say or do might be a stumbling block to somebody else. And another great Christina story, she was waiting for her mom, and some kids were kind of picking on her. And she was telling about her mom about it later, and of course her mama heart is, roaring a little bit. She says, oh, Mom, it's okay. I rebuked them. I told them that wasn't a very nice way to treat somebody. So sometimes one of my kids with ADHD, we used to call him our little theologian. At 4, he was asking like these huge theological, hard to wrestle with questions. So sometimes kids with special needs are actually a little bit more aware than what the rest of us are. As a friend, how can you help when your friend thinks they might be in Holland? Please be a safe place for your friend. Be a haven. Don't be a naysayer. If they say, oh, gee, it's kind of bothering me that he's not talking yet. Do not say, oh, it's okay. He'll be fine. I'm sure everything's okay. Be the safe place. Say, yeah, I can understand why that you might be concerned. What do you think we should do about it? And if she's like, I have no idea, what do? You say, let me ask around. I'll see what's out there. And then lay the information. If she never touches it, she never does anything with it. That's the hard part. When you are the friend and you collect information for somebody or show somebody something, you have to be a friend and let them make their choices and pray for them. Don't control. Don't seek to control your friend and their family with your information, but be willing to be a servant, be the research assistant, and help them out. Be a sounding board, but also be that kid's cheerleader. Oh, wow, I love how he always shares with my son. You're doing a great job. Say positive things about their parenting, say positive things about their child. But when they raise a concern, be a safe haven, because they will get that oftentimes from their spouses and oftentimes from the rest of their family, and sometimes even the first few times to the pediatrician. They need somebody safe that will hear them and come alongside and say, your concern is my concern. And be there and hear them. Okay. Another thing that, and the other thing I want to say is when you're determining, listen and watch your kids. If you're like, okay, I don't know where I am, you know, watch, compare to other kids their age, what they're doing and not doing. You know, give them some grace, yes, but if it's bugging you, you know, if it's bugging you, there's a reason. And the question needs answered. And if you pursue the question, and the question ends up, no, everything's fine, the question is answered. And maybe, just maybe, that route you went, and everything's ended up okay, wasn't about you. Maybe you met somebody on the way and were kind to them or encouraged them or drew attention to something that they needed. Sometimes life isn't all about us. I'm absolutely convinced that Jessie was born in a different hospital than what we had planned, because there was a nurse who needed to know that child number 4, 5, 6, 7 was still valuable to a mama. Okay, sorry guys, I never cried when they put my newborn in my arms, but Jessie had a little bit of trouble breathing, so they took him to the nursery. I finally got to go to the nursery, and they were like going to give him a bath. And I'm like, if you can give him a bath, can I hold him? And they said, well, yeah, you haven't held him yet? No, I haven't. They put him in my arms. I burst into tears. The nurse sitting on the other side of the nursery looks over me and goes, what baby is this? 7, but he's a separate human being than the other 6. Sometimes what I'm saying is sometimes life isn't all about us. If God is nudging you for something, there's a reason for it. And don't feel like it was wasted time or energy if you pursue something and they go, oh, that was fine. Maybe you need that information to help somebody else later. God doesn't waste anything. And so don't, beat yourself up if, oh, you went and looked at this and everything ended up being fine and all of a sudden your child had a developmental spurt and everything was hunky-dory. If God took you down that little trail, it was for a reason and he's going to use it somehow, some way. Maybe just to teach you and make you address some of these issues we talked about success and the value of life. I don't know. But God had a reason for it and he's not going to waste it. Listen and watch. Sometimes we miss things. It's good sometimes to get other people's opinions. But listen and watch. So, you decide you're in Holland, and now what? Well, now you need a guide. You need to hire a guide. And this is a scary part of the journey, especially for homeschoolers. There's all those true, horrible, awful stories. And I know people who have, our Noah, who lost his family for over a year because of a weird doctor call. And he's back. And everybody involved is now saying he should have never not been in the home. But those fears are legitimate. Pray for wisdom and ask around. We have a whole huge list outside of local doctors that people in our homeschool group have said, these are good people to go to. They seem professional. Remember, doctors are people too. You got a good plumber and you got a bad plumber, right? I see those, heating, cooling, plumbing questions come across Grace. I do it all the time too. Who is good? Because we know not all plumbers are created equal. Guess what? In their doctor's class, somebody was at the bottom of class. Okay? Somebody's in it just for the money and not because they really care. There are good doctors and bad doctors. Remember, you have hired them. And you can fire them. You are not serving them, you are not under their authority. You are hiring them. That doesn't mean go in with an arrogant attitude. But it does mean if you're uncomfortable with somebody, try somebody else. If you don't like the approach somebody is taking, if you are sure, be sure, don't just jump out every time you don't have a disagreement or don't see eye to eye with your doctor on something, or they don't move on something you think they should move with. Don't doctor hop. But do know that if you feel threatened, it is okay to move on. Okay, if you don't feel like you're being heard or taken seriously, it's okay to move on. If you don't like the approach the physical therapist is using, there's a lot of other approaches and a lot of other therapists out there. So it is that. Make a list. Make a list. Please make lists. Please make lists. I will guarantee you, after 20 years of doing this, the question that has been nagging on your mind for the last 6 months, and you finally get into the specialist, I guarantee you, if you don't write it down, you'll get off on something else, and you'll never ask that question. You'll go home, be halfway home, and go, I can't believe it. Ask me how I know. There were times when Amy was in the hospital, I had one question all day long, watching for the doctor to come for 6 hours. They came, we got off on something else. I waited 6 hours, watching, waiting to ask the question, and I didn't ask it because I didn't write it down. The doctors also like it because it's an efficient way to use their time. Some doctors will go, here, let me see that, and just tick down because they're pushed by their facilities to be efficient. And by insurance companies. And so you can help them, help you by going in prepared for this is what we need to do. Let me see if I have this later or not. Okay. Also, when you go in for appointments, leave the mommy hat at home. Leave your mommy hat at home. Go in as part of a team. See yourself as a teacher or a therapist going to a meeting about a child that you're working with. Your emotion, if you do not, your emotions will cloud what you hear. You will react in ways that put off the doctor. You will sound challenging and arrogant and panicky, and you won't get the best care, honestly. If you can throw off the mommy hat, put on the therapist, teacher, special ed teacher hat, and go in as if you were going to a meeting that this was not your child, but somebody else's child, and you were helping. That is extremely important. If you need a therapist, especially a professional, and you can't find anybody who's had this kind, you can't get a referral from anybody that is a homeschooler that's been there. Call anonymously. Don't identify yourself, and ask some key questions. If you don't vaccinate, ask them if vaccinating is non-vaccinating is an issue with that doctor. But kind of phrase it neutrally so they can answer both ways. When the first time I had a special ed intervention teacher come to my house, I said, no, we're not doing any assessments, I just want to talk and see what you have to offer from the school system. By the way, you've already paid for that. Use it. Their level of service is functional critical classroom. My level of service is the best you can do. They aren't the same. Use those services that are available to you, because sometimes they do get you to the best the child can do or all that they need. But like we did receptive speech, we played both systems for years and years and years. We did it private and we did it use the school system because you've already paid for those school system services. Our school system, from what I've heard, it wasn't here that we used it, is very good with homeschoolers and it's not an issue. But when Denise first came to our house back in Iowa, I remember very vividly sitting on the couch and saying, okay, I have these other 2 toddlers. I am planning to homeschool. Is that going to be an issue for you? I just asked her. And she said, I teach parents how to teach their kids, so why would that be an issue for me? Which was a beautiful answer, and I treasure it to this day. But, be upfront, ask your questions, express your concerns. But again, do it in that kind of matter-of-fact, non-emotional way. Another thing you need to do when you go to a new country is to learn the language. Learn the language. When the doctor's rattling off something and you have no clue what he just said, or you don't know what that word means, say, excuse me, can you explain that? What was that word you used? How did you describe that? Write it down. And write down what it means. I am very serious about this. Because then when you go from that doctor and you go talk to this therapist and you use the same vocabulary, they're addressing the right thing. Chances are the way you describe it to him and you describe it to them, and they're going to come back with different nuances of the same thing or emphasize different parts of it. If you go to the therapist and said the doctor said X, Y, Z, they'll know exactly what they're supposed to address. Learn the language. People begin to think you're a nurse. That's another honorary degree. But I know nothing about a zillion things, but if it has to do with VCF or tube feeding or whatever, I have been asked by multiple doctors if I'm a nurse, because I know this little world and this vocabulary. So learn the vocabulary. It's really not that hard, and doctors really do end up appreciating you explaining it and you learning their words. It also, when you go from doctor to doctor, increases your respectability. You become known as a knowledgeable parent and a capable parent just by using the vocabulary. And doctors will do more for you and tell you more if you do that. There are some things that you need to adjust to as you are a foreigner. There is still the culture shock. You'll still miss Italy. This quote came across Facebook this week. Occasionally weep deeply over the life you hoped would be, grieve the losses, then wash your face, trust God, and embrace what you have. And I thought that was very powerful for today. In Isaiah, I was reading in Isaiah, if you read the Isaiah 41 to 45 block in there, over and over again, he says, I will be with you and I will strengthen you. God is already there. He's already at that therapy appointment, doctor's appointment, whatever. And friends, don't be afraid to tell your friend that's in Holland about your trip to Italy. They want to rejoice with you that your kid just finished The Lord of the Rings when yours can't read yet and is the same age. They do. Now, sometimes they may still go home and cry, and that's okay, but they want to be your friend. They want to rejoice with you. Don't say, oh no, I can't tell them about whatever. Another thing that I wanted to mention as far as how to help as a friend, ask them, would you like me to go with you and watch the kids? Sometimes the hard part about having a child with a need is trying to decide, do I go to an appointment and leave the rest of my kids with a sitter and just take this child and go? Or is it more important to our family unity for us to invade the whole waiting room? Chris and Hannah were not homeschooled. They were waiting room schooled. They were van schooled. They were not homeschooled. But trust what God is going to do in their lives too, because we had great therapists who knew that if they did things with the older kids, Amy would want to be involved, and so they did. Now, not all therapists are comfortable with that. Some are freaked out by more than one child. But they went, Hannah ended up working with special needs kids because of it. I mean, I remember seriously being, praying about, God, are they going to be bitter? Are they going to be whatever? The day she came bounding down the stairs at 7 and said, I think I want to be a physical therapist when I grow up. I went, okay, God, I'm done. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have worried. God is preparing them for the good works they are to do too. And having a sibling with a challenge is part of their preparation. I'm not saying you have to take all your kids to every appointment. But as a friend, find out what is important to your friend. Do you want me to watch your kids, or would you like me to go with you and help you with the kids while you're at your appointment? Would you like to have a meal ready at home when I get home? I'll tell you, those mornings getting ready to go or the night before are crazy, especially if you have to travel for them. You know what? When you get all the kids tucked into bed, let's sneak away for an ice cream cone and tell me about your appointment. Be their sounding board, because I guarantee you it is very likely, not all guys are like this, that they will have to edit what they tell their husband. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And when they talk to their mom does not want their baby girl going through hard times. So you're going to edit your feelings out. It's kind of like being the pastor's wife, you know. You can't. You have to be friendly to everybody, but you can't be too friendly with anybody, or everybody's going to get at you. Okay. Be the person that they can be safe with. Do not panic if they cry and throw a fit 1 minute, because they'll probably be fine the next and ready for battle again. I remember very vividly, I would stand on the playground. I hate the stupid feeding tube. I hate having to hover over Amy and making sure she doesn't go down the slide on her tummy like all the other kids are doing, because it's going to rip it out of her stomach and we're going to have to go have major abdominal surgery again. I hate it. But I am so glad, because 100 years ago or 50 years ago or across the world, she'd be starving to death. Those are both in there. Let them be for your friend. Don't panic. Oh no, she's not handling it well. She's going to have a breakdown. No, she's being human. They're both in there, and it's okay. I am so frustrated he can't read, but I'm so happy he can put things together so well. They're both in there, and it's okay. And let's be that safe person for your friend. When you have long-term issues, especially long-term issues that involve having to go outside the home for help, please do consider, for the routine things, taking your other kids with you and attaching something fun. 1 year when we were going an hour and a half, very routinely away, instead of eating lunch out, we bought a zoo membership. We had a little zoo in Des Moines. So we would take our sandwiches, eat them at the zoo, spend 20 minutes walking around the zoo. We had a membership. We could just spend 20 minutes, but attach something fun to it. My kids know the Des Moines Capitol inside out. They could probably lead the tour. They know the historical building. They've been to almost every park worth going to in Des Moines. Yeah, we wandered the University of Iowa campus and found where they had all the stuffed animals and stuff. Attach fun things. It's a field trip. You can mark it off, okay? If you live in Tennessee, count it as ours. But it is, make it a family thing. Really, really, really go into therapy appointments with your child and ask the therapist, what do you want me to be working on? Several things will happen. First, you'll know what to work on. Secondly, you can get to the point after about 6 or 8 appointments, you can say, okay, well, instead of having our next appointment, can we skip one and you just give me a list to work on? Suddenly you don't have to do that trip. And if you really work on it, it gets, I got to the point where I touch base with the receptive language therapist once every 6 weeks. Now that's about all as far as they could push it and still have us technically be their patient. But you can do yourself good. Attach therapy things to everyday family. Everything, something that you always do anyway, otherwise it won't get done. If you always read to the kids after lunch, then read to the kids after lunch and then do a therapy thing with your kiddo. Or, like we had to do a lot of physical therapy stuff, so always when you're changing a kid and stuff, they always got stretched or whatever. Just make it a part of life. Don't make it this special Something else about being in Holland is that you will have family members and friends and church friends who don't think you're in Holland. They think you're deluded. They think you're really in Italy and you just think you're in Holland. Because they so want you to be in Italy. Remember that? A lot of the criticisms we get are from people who love us and desperately just want everything to be right. They want you to be happy. They want you to have a nice life. And they're scared for you. So a lot of times the snarly comment from Grandma is really her way of saying, I want happy for you. If they have a criticism, address it and say, yeah, oh, you should just put him in school. You're running yourself ragged. Okay, Grandma, what do you see? Maybe she sees something that needs to be addressed. Maybe you do need to not be on the support website till midnight and need 2 more hours of sleep a night. Maybe she's right. So even when it's said nasty, consider if there's any truth in what they say. Investigate it. And then say, thank you for sharing my concern. My husband and I will talk about that. A lot of times, that's all they needed. They just needed to tell you they're worried and they're scared. And sometimes they're right about something. We get so caught up in what we're doing. Oh, you're not even paying attention to the other kids. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I do need to sit down and have a special time with so-and-so. Okay? A word about husbands. They're mad. Men are wired different than we do. And not all men. I know some men who are very up to they're probably more involved than their wives are and their kids' special needs. But they're men. Men like to fix, and they are wired to protect. They cannot protect you and their baby girl from the medical thing that's going on or from the learning disability. And that is hard to the core. I will tell a story of my husband. He's heard me tell it before. Amy and I were going into the hospital for a test for 10 days, an hour and a half away. I had 2 toddlers at home, and my mom, who raised me, was going to be there watching them. So, she's already got double than what she's used to. Our bathroom had needed remodeled for a long time. The weekend before we go in the hospital for 10 days, my husband tears apart our bathroom. God said he needs something he can control and something he can fix. Let him. Don't complain. Just realize that is their way of handling it. And it's okay. That's why we need safe friends that we can say, I feel terrible, I feel horrible about this. We go to our husband and we say that. They want to fix it and they can't and they're panicked and they're probably going to withdraw. That's just what men do. And I will be honest, families with kids with challenges rarely make it. Marriages rarely make it. You have to understand that, and there are times you're going to have to go to your husband and say, okay, I know you're a man, I know you want to fix this, but I'm a woman, and I just need to tell you how I feel, and I need to cry, and I need you to hold me. There was one time I called Terry, and I said, okay, I just got test results. When I get home, so-and-so's going to watch the kids. I need you to take me out on the Appalachian Trail where nobody can hear me, and I need you to hold me, and I need you to let me fall. That's okay, too. You can be a woman, and you can tell your husband, I need to be a woman. But by and large, let them be a man. Tell them what they can fix. Tell them how they can help. If they want more information, get it. If they want bare bones, give it to them. You're working together, and God put you together for a reason. So please, love your husbands, respect your husbands, and don't disrespect your husbands because they handle things differently than the way you do. Because they all grieve different. I asked a friend of mine who was a psychologist one time, I'm like, is Terry okay? His parent died and I haven't seen him cry yet. And she said, well, this and this and this. I said, no. She said, let him be. He doesn't need to grieve the way you grieve. He needs to grieve the way he grieves. And it's okay. We need to give each other that. And like I said, it is definitely okay to say sometimes, okay, honey, I'm going to act like a woman tonight. I'm going to fall apart on you. Just get ready. You know? But don't be bitter against him for it. And then, in the end, while Amy was yet to be diagnosed, we had this wonderful man, Dr. Peter Bozen, who, he was the first one that took us seriously. And for the 4 years that it took for her to get a diagnosis, he was, I mean, we saw that man every 2 to 6 weeks. And then actually until we moved here. I mean, he was like an uncle to Amy. But before she was diagnosed, I'd bring in my list of these zillion things to ask him. And he would answer them the best he could. And most of them at that point he couldn't answer. And then he'd get in my face. And he'd say, but she's wonderful, isn't she? Don't forget, this is not a problem. Although you put off your mommy hat when you go to your appointment, this is not a problem to be solved. Or a mystery to be unraveled. This is your child. Have a relationship. Laugh with them. Tickle them. Unless he's real sensory, so defensive. But he's your child. And delight in having a child. And don't just see the disability end of it. Enjoy who they are as people. And that's a whole nother long story. But